Hagon Harav Eliezer Menachem bin Shach, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, stated in his famous speech in Yad Eliyahu, something like, I think, nearly 40 years ago, maybe it was 40 years ago now, where he put his foot down and would not allow the Haredi world, and he was in control to a large extent at that point in time of the Haredi world. His influence was paramount at that time. He would not go along with the machinations of certain individuals, such as Ali Aderi, for example, who wished to create a political union or political arrangement with the Israeli left, the anti-Torah left. The Haredim would join forces with them and thus remove the Likud, so-called right-wing Likud, from power. And Rav Shach was not right-wing. In other words, he was, in terms of what to do with Eretz Yisrael, he was not right-wing. But he was very much the anti-Torah people, and he would not allow this to happen. And because of him, it didn't happen at that time. And during that speech, this is a famous speech that was broadcast live on most Israeli media at that time, an amazing thing in itself. It was a whole stadium. The Yad Eliyahu Stadium in Tel Aviv had been rented out, and it was full of Haredim, and Rav Shach spoke to them. And he also, and he spoke freely. He spoke his mind as he tended to do. He didn't pull his punches. And he also spoke his mind about Lubavitch, about Chabad. And he said, and I quote, this is on record, he said that the Rebbe Lubavitch is an apikoros. That's what he said. He is a kofer. He does not accept the Torah. He contradicts the Torah. In which way? He said, because he says you're not required to sleep in a sukkah. And the Gemara, that's what he said. The Gemara says you do have to. It's actually a Mishnah, as I'm stating. It's actually a Mishnah, but he said the Gemara says you do have to, and that's correct. And that's how it appears in every halachic handbook, in the Shulchan Aruch, for example. And therefore, his position is completely unacceptable. It contradicts and overturns the Torah, which is a fact. That's a reality. Again, Chabad will tell you that no, we have these deep Kabbalistic explanations which you don't understand, but we do, and we know that it's not the right thing to do, and this is therefore why we do it. Lubavitch, Chabad have a shita. In other words, they in principle will not sleep in the sukkah. They say it's the wrong thing to do.
Night, there's nothing stopping them.
In other words, if you live in Kfar Chabad, which is in Eretz Yisrael, and the climate is very mild. It's actually very warm, and it's perfectly possible to sleep at the sukkah. They will not sleep at the sukkah.
Right. I don't know if I knew
it's
that.
The wrong thing to do.
It's the wrong thing.
The wrong thing to do. Okay, that's the fact. And they will tell you, and this is true, that the Tzemach Tzedek, I hope I'm not misspeaking, I believe it was the Tzemach Tzedek who came up with this idea that that's the name used to refer to one of their leaders, one of their rebbes. He came up with this, and I said newfangled. I said that very deliberately. In other words, in all Kabbalistic texts up to that time, there was never such a suggestion. It's not in the Zohar, it's not in Kitvei Ha'ari. No one had ever heard of such a thing, including in all those parts of the Jewish world that were completely overrun by and influenced by Kabbalah, etc. No one ever heard of such an idea. But Chabad came up with this idea. And they will tell you that it's based on this Kabbalistic reasoning, etc., etc. And I'm telling you, it has nothing to do with that. That's not the real reason. That's just the excuse. That's the terms in which it is framed. The real reason is Galuth-induced trauma. In the case of the Tzemach Tzedek, he particularly couldn't stomach the fact that we, the Jewish people, are unable to perform this mitzvah of Sukkah properly, fully, We haven't been doing it for a long time, and he could not accept. He couldn't get his head around the idea that it's because of the weather. That we're in Galuth, we're not where the Torah is supposed to be kept and lived by in Eretz Yisrael. We're somewhere else. We've been here for a long time, and therefore this mitzvah of Sukkah has been completely corrupted and upended by by dint of reality. And he couldn't accept it. That was the reason. So he had to come up with a different reason. And of course, the best possible reason is something to which you can attach the word Kabbalah, and then it becomes not only kosher, not only reasonable, but actually you're on a higher level. If you're not sleeping in the sukkah for this reason, then you're on a higher level than anyone who does, because they just don't understand the tifkai, the omek, the depth of your understanding of the Torah, and you do, Baruch Hashem, and you being a Chabadnik, you know better than everybody else, obviously, because that by definition is what Chabad think. And if they don't tell you this to your face, that's because they're being polite, but that's the fact. And they and look at the Jewish world in these terms. You have Chabadnikim, then you have Hasidim, then you have Misnagdim, Litaim, and then you have Dati Lumi, and beyond below that is too lowly to even discuss. So they understand that they're the only people who really understand the Torah. That's what a true Chabadnik thinks, without the slightest doubt or question. And that is the reason. Their Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, was driven crazy by the Galuth, by the fact that we cannot sleep in a sukkah, and we have to come up with a better reason than the fact that it's very cold. That's the bottom line. So this also speaks volumes if you are able to extrapolate from what I've just said, and if you accept what I just said as being true, then you understand from this many things that you can find in those parts of the Jewish world that were heavily influenced by Kabbalah. Many things were understood in a new way, redefined, relabeled, and repackaged.
Made up? Is that?
You can use that word, absolutely, I think, yes. But certainly many things were reassessed, redefined, repackaged in a manner which is more significant and meaningful to a Jew living in the reality of Galuth, rather than living in the reality of Eretz Yisrael in a Tanakh informed reality, if you want to put it that way.